me to put
Yes. Welcome to the latest episode of the Navigating Disability podcast. Welcome to our co-host Jen Abbott. Welcome, Jen.
Hello there. Happy Friday.
Today, we are honoured to speak with Dr. Ashleigh Moreland, otherwise known simply as Ash. Ash is a dear friend of mine and someone who I've personally engaged with throughout my journey as a parent of a child with children with disabilities, and then someone who helped me through my own diagnosis. Ash is an exceptional leader in the field of applied neuroscience and specialising in neuropsychology. Ash is driven by the singular mission to create a ripple effect of healing and resilience that transforms lives, something most people need when they are involved with disability, either as a person with a disability or as a professional. Ash is a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, coach and consultant. Welcome, Ash. Thank you so much for giving up your time today to speak with our audience.
Thanks for having me. What a beautiful introduction. I'm really excited to share my story and hopefully inspire everyone listening.
And it is an amazing story. So I'm going to start right from the beginning. Tell me about you.
All right, me. So I think I have a story that comes before the story. So even before I was a mum or a carer, I had a really complex medical history and basically had a mystery issue that doctors just couldn't find an answer for. So I started having symptoms from when I was about 11, and doctor after doctor just fobbed it off and started to feel like they were suggesting I was just a bit of a hypochondriac, and everyone kind of just went, oh, well, we've done the best we can and now move on. That was pretty much with me right through my teen years until I was 18, when I was finally diagnosed with a brain tumor that had affected me since I was 11. So from that context, it was pretty brutal. I had a early life experience of feeling unheard, of feeling really medically gaslit. My parents kind of did the best that they could with what they knew, but I grew up in a small country town. There wasn't a big choice of experts or doctors, so they probably did the best that they could. And also they weren't experts at advocacy or anything like that. And back then, I mean, we're talking about the 90s and early 2000s. I don't think we had anywhere near the support then of what we have now. Obviously, that story had a positive ending because I'm healthy and well, and taught me a lot. Because at 18 years old, I was living alone in Melbourne, didn't have any family here, navigated that season of my life. I had to learn pretty quickly how to, I guess, take my own health and healing into my own hands. And that was really lucky that I had that experience, because only a few years later, when I was 23, I had my first child, and he was typically developing until his 12-month immunizations. And what I didn't know, I was a very pro-vax human. I was probably too pro-vax. I was the obnoxious one in all the comments online, really slamming people who were so irresponsible that they wouldn't vaccinate their kids. And at his 12-month immunization, I think he might have just had a little bit of a cold, and we'd just moved into state the same week, and I didn't know any different. Anyway, for whatever reason, he ended up having a really severe adverse reaction. And he, within 3 days of his immunizations, was just a shell. It was like the body of my child was still there, but it was like he wasn't in his body anymore. It was like he was just a shell of a human, which was really scary. Because we had just moved to another state, I didn't have any track record with any doctors. No one knew us. So I went to all these doctors who basically just said, oh, boys will be boys, or, oh, it's normal for kids to not sleep through the night, or, oh, I had 3 doctors try and prescribe me anxiety medication because I was the problem. There's nothing wrong with my son. I was the problem. And so it was kind of history repeating itself, going, I'm not bloody crazy. I'm not imagining this. This is real. Like, my kid went from this to this. It might be normal in comparing to other babies, these behaviors, but it's not normal for my child. And so I was at the time was doing my PhD in neuroplasticity. And have you ever seen the movie Taken?
I love that movie.
Yes, right. You know, when Liam Neeson, there's that really, really hardcore moment when Liam Neeson's on the phone is like, if it's money you want, I don't have a lot of that. But what I
Yeah.
do have is a very particular set of skills and blah, blah, blah.
Yep. I love it.
Well, that was kind of how I felt as at that point, I was 24, just turned 24. I didn't have anything else at my disposal except I knew how to research. I
Yeah.
was a professional researcher. I was doing a PhD in neuro and the brain. And so I spent all of my waking hours just researching everything that I possibly could to help my child. And that led me down all these rabbit holes of holistic health, healing, understanding the nervous system, I guess, in a more integrative way. Even understanding our gut and the role that our gut has, and our environment and our emotional state, and all of these kinds of things. And so, I guess being a career researcher was, again, the absolute blessing that I learned really quickly that I wasn't the mum that he needed me to be. And I had to learn really bloody quickly how to become the advocate, how to become the researcher, how to become the specialist, because the specialists that we had didn't have the answers. And
And
I refused to, I don't know that settle's the right word, accept. I refused to accept that that was as good as his life was going to get,
yeah.
and that I had this healthy, flourishing son to a kid who would scream for hours and hours and hours in distress. He would wake 8 or 9 times every single night. He had developed allergies and intolerances to almost everything that he ate or was exposed to. I couldn't put sunscreen on him. He couldn't handle sensory stuff anymore. And his fine motor skills completely tanked, his language tanked, his everything. So I refused to accept that I had a fairly typically developing child and then overnight didn't. And I had to accept that that was the kid that was coming with us into our future.
I think the doctors forget that mama knows best. Mama knows her child. And
Yeah.
it's the mum instinct.
It is. And I'm so glad that you raised that, because in preparing for this conversation, I thought about what are some of the takeaways that I would love for people to come away with. And the first one is that your instincts are powerful. A huge component of my work is, so I founded the Remind Institute a few years ago, and we don't advertise that we can fix people, help people, heal people. But what we do is we help people to understand how to hear and heal themselves. And what I mean by that is you tune in to learn how to listen to your body and how to hear and respond to those instincts. Because I think throughout our lives, maybe because of authority, maybe because of, I don't know, society in general, following our instincts and being that intuitive, responsive human is not really how the world works. The world works in uniformity and everyone doing the same test and the same, like same path, I guess.
We're told how to act. We're told what to believe. We're taught. Yeah, we're taught. That's how we're brought up.
Yeah.
And we're taught to not listen.
Yeah.
How our body's feeling and
absolutely. And isn't that so amazing? Like I now, as an adult, my instincts and intuition, and for me, there's a really big spiritual component to that. But even at the base, if spirituality is not your thing, that's okay. You still can have an awareness of instincts or gut feelings or intuition. And I think learning how to hear that, learning how to interpret that, learning and trusting, I think it's the trust thing, because we are taught to abdicate our responsibility and put our faith and trust in doctors, which means quite often we don't trust our feelings and senses and instincts. And don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not for a second saying don't put your trust in doctors, but I don't think it's a case of handing over our faith and trust. It's got to be more of a collaborative effort, and having a doctor who's willing to hear and hold space for your instincts and intuition and explore with you and have those conversations, because I've had some instincts before which having those really open and safe conversations with a doctor has helped me to realize that it was fear. It wasn't an
Yeah.
intuition based thing. But how important is that? How important is it that we have to rule out our own fear overlaying our
Yeah.
perceptions? Like, that's massive.
I think it's about nurturing yourself, isn't it?
Yeah. And sense
Believing
of
and
self.
believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we lose over the years. I know I have.
Yeah.
I'm regaining it now, but I think it's, we have to trust in ourselves and I guess fight against the cause, so to speak, like a question.
Absolutely.
And I'm a big, as Kate will tell you, I question a lot
Yeah.
because I need it to make sense.
Yeah.
Need people to make it make sense
Yeah.
so I can form my own opinion. So it might
Totally.
hate up the wall sometimes, but
Yeah. And there's a few things in that, right? Like, one of my favorite sentences ever is help me understand.
yeah,
Help me understand why you drew that conclusion. Help me understand why that's your recommendation over this. Help me understand.
yeah,
And I've had doctors who have basically given the equivalent of because I said so. And I've gone, that's actually not helpful. That's actually not helpful. Like, actually help me understand. And that's why I'm so blessed for my historical expertise being research, because I can help me understand. I have the skills and the expertise to be able to help me understand. And it's also why in my work, I'll stop at nothing to help someone understand something. I'll use analogies. I'll use like my little props here, my Harry and
Hey,
Sally.
Sally, yes.
I'll use whatever I have to. I'll explain the same thing 15 different ways if that's what is needed for someone to understand something.
yeah.
Because I think there's so much power in that, because that's how we become empowered. When we actually understand, we're not at the mercy of someone else. We're not handing over and abdicating our responsibilities to someone else.
But I also think the issue there, Ash, is that it's all about time. And when we go to specialists and
Yeah.
they are backed up appointment by appointment, they just throw the information out.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it, there's no time taken to explain
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So this is really interesting that you say that, because it's one of the experiences that I've had in our early childhood intervention stuff. My son is almost, well, he's 11 and a half. So we're kind of out of that now and he is thriving. But something that in our experience, I found the same thing, because I don't personally work with children. And the reason that I chose not to work with children is because there's only so much I can do with the child in that 45 minutes every week or fortnight or however often I might see them. But if I can work to equip the parents or their caregivers who are then with them for a whole lot more of that time, the outcomes that those kids get are exponentially greater. And I think what we've moved towards developing, which I'm really excited that we'll be launching in 2025, is a whole lot of resources and courses that can go alongside the practitioners. So, say, for example, speechies and OTs and child psychs and all that kind of stuff, even chiropractors, osteos, people who are seeing adult clients for musculoskeletal issues and chronic pain, which we know goes hand in hand with trauma in the nervous system. But having these courses that are easily accessible, that breaks it down step by step in understanding the nervous system. How is the mind different to the brain? What is actually going on for you behaviorally? How can our voice affect things? How can the words that we say, like basic stuff in understanding how to implement and apply these things to make a tangible difference in our day-to-day life, that the practitioners themselves might not have the time resource to be able to equip particularly, obviously for us there's a focus in that pediatric space, but yeah, particularly for those clients who are willing to do that work to increase their understanding, to grow and evolve, but it's a limitation of the system of time.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your son now. So you've gone through where, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a point where you considered him to be normal. And then there was a point where he lost all those functions.
Yeah.
To where we are now, what's changed for him? How, I don't really know what I'm trying to say. You said that he's thriving now.
Yeah.
What's happened over the last 10 years for him to thrive?
Oh my gosh, so much has happened. So I think I mentioned before, I just went down so many different rabbit holes, and it was interesting because as a scientist, you probably think that quite often you go, "Oh my gosh, I've worked it out, I've got the answer," but then you ask the next question, and every answer comes up with more questions. And so I probably had so many of those eureka moments of like, "Oh my gosh, this is the holy grail of the root cause," but then that root cause had another root cause, and so over the time we ended up so what I had established, I mentioned that he had developed a lot of allergies and intolerances, and understanding that effectively what happened, I'm going to explain this in a very easy to understand non-scientific way, but effectively what happened is, for whatever reason, his immune system was activated in the way that was intended by that immunization, but it had an abnormal response to it. And so his immune system essentially started attacking healthy cells, and part of that was significant damage to his gut. So the gut is kind of like a net that holds chemicals in, and certain chemicals pass through and can cross through to that blood-brain barrier. For him, chemicals were crossing that really shouldn't cross. And so he had symptoms of brain inflammation, and those symptoms of brain inflammation essentially are ADHD and ASD. So what we established was, first of all, we did the RPA hospital food chemical elimination, which is a hospital in Sydney that developed a food chemical elimination specifically for ADHD. That was life-changing for us because, so it didn't heal him, but what it did was it helped us to get to a baseline where he was more settled.
Yeah.
And so because he was more settled, he wasn't in distress, because the thing that was so hard for me was he would have these crazy lash outs. Like, he was a danger to himself and to us. His first day of prep, he was the kid throwing, not first day of prep, but very, in prep, early prep, he was the kid throwing chairs across the classroom and really completely dysregulated and completely out of sorts. But he would then cry, going, "Mummy, I don't want to be that naughty kid. It's not me. It's not me. I can't control my body. I don't want to be that. I don't want to do those things." And he would be crying at a loss, just going, "I know what's happening, but I can't stop it from happening." And that was heartbreaking. And so that food chemical elimination diet, it's diagnostic in nature, right? So I kept a very detailed diary, got him to a baseline where he was sleeping, eating well, behaviorally balanced. He was like a completely different child. And then one by one, we tested specific chemicals. And some of the chemicals are, the things that we know about, like artificial flavors and preservatives and all that sort of stuff. But some of them were naturally occurring. So, for instance, the one that affected him probably the most severely was called amines. Now, amines are in pork products, meat, cheese. Amines are like in pawpaw, and bananas are really high in amines. Guess what his favorite food was? Bananas. He would have like 4 bananas a day. But I didn't know that him craving bananas was a sign that his nervous system was on fire, and he used to smack his head repeatedly into concrete because it felt like his brain was on fire.
Oh, wow.
And the bananas was causing, the amines in the bananas was causing his brain to be on fire, and that was his rage. That was when he would go into these thrashing, raging moments. Anyway, so really doing that diagnostic process got us to a baseline where we could kind of recover and catch our breath a little bit and go, "Oh my gosh, life isn't just this full-on Hunger Games every second of the day, wondering if we're going to survive the next outburst." From there, it was going, okay, well, we can't live for the rest of his life with 5 foods. So now what? So the now what was, I came across the Nemetschek protocol, which was again, the next life-changing step for us, which is all about healing the autonomic nervous system. So over time, we had to go super low and super slow. That helped to heal his gut. It helped to resolve all of his food intolerances. So it got him back to a point of even being able to tolerate foods with colors. And not that that is a huge part of his diet, but I mean, it's a part of childhood, I think. Like if you're going to a friend's party or something, the only thing is that he's celiac, so gluten remains off the table, but everything else he can eat to his heart's content. You know, as long as it doesn't have gluten or wheat, he's totally fine.
Wow.
I think the other things were understanding his nervous system and teaching him through me learning. So that's another thing that for me personally in my journey is I mentioned before I learned really quickly I wasn't the mum that he needed me to be. But also I had a really huge history of childhood trauma and also ADHD that I didn't know about, which helped me to understand that when my nervous system was dysregulated and I was in a flight response, which is where I spent almost all of my existence. How do you know if you're in a flight response? Overthinking, can't sit still, can't stop, always rushing, feeling like you're in a hurry all the time. That's the flight response. And if my nervous system is in a flight response and he is attuned to me because his survival depends on it, I'm his primary caregiver, my nervous system is unconsciously and energetically communicating to his nervous system that there's a threat in the environment and he needs to activate his survival responses to evade that threat, even if there's no real threat. But that's how our children operate. Yes. So he didn't know that it was my childhood trauma and it's not going to come and hunt him down. He didn't know that it was because his dad and I had a fight. He didn't know it was because I was stressed over money. He doesn't know that. But while ever my nervous system was so dysregulated that it was communicating that there is this invisible threat in the environment, well, he relies on me for his survival. And so he has to activate his survival responses in order to survive the threat that he can't see, because it's not a real threat. It's not physically there. So learning that and healing that was life-changing.
I just want to stop you there because I'm sitting here from a perspective of someone that's listening. Yeah. And in the past, I would have said to you, wow, that's amazing. That's great. You're what are you?
Neurophysiologist.
Neurophysiologist. How the hell am I, as a parent who has no background like you whatsoever, how the hell am I going to do what you've just said? You've got...
It's not taught. That particular information is not taught. The other thing that I found really interesting that's also not taught is that, and it's one of those things, like if I knew then what I know now, oh my gosh, what would you do differently, right? If I knew before I had kids what I know now, I would have gone deep into healing and I would have learned how to regulate my nervous system and I would have done everything I possibly could. Because here's the other thing that exploded my brain. When you're pregnant, your baby's brain is growing inside of you, but it's growing based off the chemical signature of your blood that's passing through the placenta. If you're in this chronically stressed state, always on the run, always busy, always overthinking, can't stop, can't sit still, or if you're in an abusive relationship, or if you're in a toxic job, your stress hormones are very high, which by the chemical signature of your blood signals to the growing brain, hey, you're going to be born into a stressful environment, so you better overdevelop those stress centers so that you survive. Let's increase your survival chances by overdeveloping the stress centers of your brain so that when you're born, you can survive the stressful environment you're going to be born into. Now,
mind blown. Sorry, I'm sitting here shaking my head, but not out of, oh, you're talking rubbish. It's just the aha moment.
It's so logical, isn't it? It makes so much sense.
You don't think of things like that. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Wow.
Again,
My
I
mind's blown.
I wish I understood that. And I wish now, like I look at when I have friends who are pregnant, when I have people in my life who I deeply care about who are pregnant, I'm like, let's love on you and nurture you and wrap you up in wool and let's get around you and take all that stress away, because how you are during pregnancy is going to determine the brain that your child is born with. That predisposes them to having ADHD because you have a stress response. You have an amygdala that basically thinks a fly is a threat and goes constantly firing these stress responses. It's overactive. So I look at it and go, wow, like my childhood best friend, we were like Bonnie and Clyde. It was so funny. But she recently had her first baby, and she is the most chilled out human being you will ever meet. And being around her baby, he is the most chilled out baby you'll ever meet. He just goes with the flow, never cries. It's just so chilled. And I'm like, I didn't understand. It used to annoy me how much nothing annoyed her because I was so highly strung.
Yeah.
But I see now, and I actually had a moment recently where my godson, who is about 4 months old, 3.5 months old, I was just having this moment with him and I had tears in my eyes because I never had the capacity to have that moment with my own child when they were babies because I didn't know any different. I was so concerned about the dishes and the house and the jobs and the thinking about that and the worrying about the career and doing this and doing that and losing the baby weight. Like I was so worried and stressed about the weight of all this other crap that I didn't get those moments of stillness with my babies.
You weren't present.
And I recognized in that, I've got goosebumps right now, but I recognized in that moment with my godson that, and I had tears in my eyes and I was choking up because it was one of the most precious moments I think I'd ever had with a baby, going, I am fully here and I'm fully in the now, and you have all of me right now. And it doesn't matter what's happening around me. It doesn't matter who needs what. It doesn't matter what's going on. It can wait. And I feel so at peace with that. And I just grieved, I think.
Yeah.
Not
But that's pretty mind-blowing, Ash, what you've just said. And probably a lot of our listeners now going, well, that's great. So I've done all this. Me as well. How do we
and me, and me, by the way.
We all do it, right? We all, it's just, that's, yeah, it's crazy.
It's not fix it because you can't go back and change it. But how do we, I suppose, is it that we've got to accept it within ourselves and then try better with the new knowledge that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never too late. I think that's the most beautiful thing is, for me, reconciling. It's one thing for me to process that grief, and I have navigated that. You guys have, everyone listening has got to understand, I had already had all my kids and they were at school by the time I understood this stuff. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I've completely screwed up my kids, join the club, friend. But also recognize that you haven't completely screwed up your kids. And I think that's the most beautiful thing when my PhD is in neuroplasticity. Literally, how can we rewire our brain? And we can rewire our brain in response to novel experiences. And so if that means that it's our normal to be a stress head and rush around and feel pressured to overdo things, guess what? Every time you pause, you are rewiring your brain because that's the novel. Every time you stop, you are rewiring your brain because that's the novel stimulus. And so when it comes to overcoming that guilt and grief, I think with our kids, obviously there's some work we do therapeutically because that grief can feel really heavy. But also it's a lot around coaching and understanding that there is a repair process. So when we show up differently, our kids are going to start to freak out a little bit because that's unpredictable for them. And when things are different, change feels very threatening to the nervous system. Even if the predictable, consistent day-to-day routine is unhealthy and dysfunctional, that still feels safer for the nervous system because at least it's predictable.
Mm.
But then this pattern changes, and all of a sudden you're smiling, and when I smash a glass and you're going, it's okay, darling. It's like, what? No. Now is when you start screaming and smacking me, or you start screaming and crying, or you carry on. This just doesn't feel safe. This feels unpredictable. And so there is a bit of a transition period in creating a new normal in relational dynamics, in family dynamics, in showing up differently. And it is one of the strangest, most bizarre things when healing and growing and changing for the better actually becomes the threat for the people around you. But it goes through a process. And then the people around you, when you can show up consistently like that, the people around you start to adapt to that new, safer, more nurturing, responsive, encouraging you. And I have this conversation with my kids all the time, right? Because it was my first child that I navigated this with. And then I have another child 3 years younger. And she doesn't cognitively remember mum who was angry and who was stressed all the time and couldn't sit still. My son does. He's old enough to remember consciously the previous version of me. And so their childhoods, if you were speaking to my kids in 30 years about their childhood, both of them would have a completely different story. They have the same mum, the same dad. They grew up in the same home, but their stories would be completely different because my son remembers the mum who was mad all the time and stressed all the time and, you know, would raise her voice and was always rushing and all that sort of stuff. My daughter doesn't remember that version of me. And so their childhoods in terms of an experience were completely different. But we have open conversations about how people can change. And what a gift is that? Like if your kids are ever going through something or they've made a mistake, what a powerful testimony to go, do you remember how I made mistakes? Am I still a good person? And they'll go, yeah. Do you still love me? Yeah, of course I do. Well, it's never too late to do better, is it? It's never too late to make different choices. It's never too late to evolve, because when we learn, that's the blessing. We don't have to go and keep making the same mistakes. We can just show everyone around us that now that we know better and we understand better, we can do better and we can commit to that. And we don't have to be perfect. We're going to screw it up. But it's okay when we screw it up.
So for all these people that are listening, what can they take away from, what can they get up and walk away and do differently right now?
They can acknowledge where they've gone wrong. I think that's a really important thing. Like a lot of people just don't know because they never knew.
I was going to say, and acknowledge because they didn't know any better, not
exactly.
because they're a bad person.
No. And I think that's such a powerful message, Kate, because no one wakes up every day and goes, how can I be a terrible caregiver today? How can I be a terrible mum today? How can I be a terrible partner today? How can I screw my kids up today? I've never met a person who actively does that, but yet we all hurt people every day. Like we all screw up. We all do things just because we don't know that we're doing it. We don't know the impact of our words. We don't know. Honestly, one of the ways that we hurt people the most is with this thing. And we don't know that we're doing it. And so recognizing it, you can do that right now. As you can recognize it, straight away delete any guilt or shame around it, because that's not helpful. What is going to be helpful is recognizing it, but then using that like a freaking fire in your belly. And I talk about revenge rage, where I'm like, I want to get revenge on that. And like getting angry. I got angry that I couldn't get my kids' childhood back. I got angry about that, not at myself, but just about at I guess the circumstance, at the unknowingness of it.
And the
I
missed
just didn't know.
Just the missed opportunity.
Yeah. And then having that as the fire in my belly every single day when I move forward in going, there is nothing more important to me. And you know what? Sometimes that means my ego gets hurt. Sometimes that looks like my kids saying, sometimes I think you care about your laptop more than you care about us. Oh, that hurts, doesn't it? But thank you so much, because if that's your experience, I am not intending that.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that with me, because now I know I need to be more careful around my laptop. Now I know. Now that I know I can do better, I can do different. So giving people permission around you, like those examples I just gave, the only reason I know them is because my kids have permission to bring things to my attention. And sometimes it feels like a kick in the guts. Sometimes I want to vomit. But it's really, really important, because if I don't give them a voice, I'm only ever assuming, or I'm suppressing their voice, which is not helpful or healthy anyway. And the same goes for in relationships. Like my husband and I have an agreement that in our relationship, we're not in our marriage to make each other comfortable. We're in our marriage to make each other better, to be the best that we can be. And sometimes that means that he has to bring things to my awareness that hurt, that sometimes I would rather not have to hear from my husband, because I care about what he thinks of me. I want him to see the best in me, but sometimes he's going to see when I'm not my best, and he has got to love me enough to help me see what he's seeing, so then I can actually do better. That's not an easy place to get to in a relationship.
That's powerful, though.
It is, though, right? So having these conversations, I give my kids permission. So because so much of our habits and behaviors are totally unconscious, we don't even realize we're doing it. If my kids want my attention, I give them permission to say, phone down, please, mum. Just giving them permission, going, hey guys, I'm really working on being more present, and I want to spend less time on my phone. So if you ever want my attention, you having my attention is way more important to me than my phone. But sometimes I'm so lost in my own little world that I don't even realize that you want my attention. So can you just say, hey mum, I need your attention. Can you please put your phone down? And they get their need met. That's unbelievable, isn't it?
I just think every parent, father, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, would take a lot out of this conversation, because we all could do better.
Everyone can.
I don't think there's a perfect scenario where this couldn't be implemented.
Totally. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important. And it's
Yeah.
never about guilt or blame or shame. It's never about punishing ourselves for what we haven't done or what we have done in the past. I call it drawing a line in the sand. And I use the analogy of the death, burial, and resurrection quite a lot, because I'm like, okay, previous version of Ash has to die. That version of Ash is not going to be the version of me that is going to be that nurturing, present, connected caregiver for previous version of Ash. Would never ever say no to anything, and she wouldn't want to let people down, and she couldn't set boundaries, and even with her kids she couldn't do that. That version of Ash is not going to be the one in the future having those eureka moments going, oh my gosh, this is amazing, how did we get here? So that version of me and that identity with those beliefs and the obligations and the expectations and the judgments and the fears and the bullshit, that's all got to die.
Yeah.
I'm going to bury that. But there's a resurrection. So the focus has to be on, what sort of parent do I want to be? What sort of partner do I want to be? What sort of caregiver do I want to be? And there's some really powerful questions we can ask, like, would I want to be married to me? If I was being cared for by me, would I feel seen, heard, and understood? If my child had a partner who was exactly like me, would I want them to stay in their relationship? And what would I want them to change? Like, there's some powerful reflection questions that feels like a punch in the gut. But if we're not willing to see it, we can't change it. So it's really powerful, right? And so big loop, Kate, to come back to what's changed with my son. This has been the biggest change, is me, because he had very poor emotional regulation because I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. And so I would be in a constant flight. I wasn't in my body. I was never present. But also, I would flip into a fight response and I would get very defensive and very snappy. And I would use, it's so hard to let these words come out of my mouth because I didn't resonate with being an angry person. But I can see retrospectively, I can see in hindsight that I would use anger to control him
Okay.
and to make my life easier because I wasn't equipped to cope with him and I was surviving every single day. So if I could use anger as a suppression tool to make my survival easier, at least I could keep us both alive.
It's really interesting you say that, Ash, because I really am relating to everything you say. I've had to change myself to improve my marriage.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm giving in or giving anything, but I actually had to stand up and be heard. And because I did that, he then had to change if we were going to grow together.
Yeah.
And, some people might not. I'm not saying it works for everyone.
But what are the alternatives? So you say he then had to change for you to continue to grow together. What are the alternatives?
We get divorced.
So you separate, the relationship falls away. So you still uphold your growth, but he chooses not to grow, so he falls away. What is the only other option?
Is that he chooses, I stay, either come back to where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I don't want
to. You come back. Yeah. Exactly. And this is what I see time and time again, which is something in my work I have probably had to focus the most on healing in me because I see people's potential and I want that for them. And I am all in. I will fight for that potential for them. What I can't do is
for them.
Well, I can't do it for them, but if their fear of loss is greater than their desire for growth, they will choose the lack of growth to keep the thing that they're scared of losing. And so it's really interesting. There's this whole conversation, I think, also around, I've been reluctant to go there in this conversation, but I think it's important to this part is as caregivers and people in the disability space, there's a lot of disempowerment out there through the, I guess, masquerading as support. And when we have found a tribe where we feel seen and heard and we connect at the level of our suffering, and we go into these forums and these support groups and people who are also suffering finally see us and we feel witnessed. The risk of that is, in order for us to heal and thrive and no longer be suffering, we have to risk losing all of that support and connection. And this is something that I had no idea about until, I mentioned before, when I was 18, I was diagnosed with this brain tumor. I joined a whole heap of support forums for that particular thing. And it was so weird because for the first time in my entire 18 years of life, I felt understood. I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me. That's exactly how I felt. That's exactly my experience. And it was like mirroring, and I felt validated and I felt supported. So much so that if someone had have said to me, well, I'm going to click my fingers and take that brain tumor away, and then you don't need to be in these groups, I probably would have chosen to keep it because of the belonging that I felt. And so it's a very bizarre concept. But I say to caregivers, a really big take-home message for me is be really mindful of where you're finding your community and your connection, and look for community and connection that demands of you evolution and growth, that there's still connection even if your situation improves. Like, I don't hang out in parents of kids on the spectrum groups anymore because yes, my child still has the diagnosis, but we're focused on living a thriving life. We just hang out with parents of other kids who are individualistic and have their own quirks. But we don't connect at that level of our son is this or that. So that's a really hard thing to think about, grieving the loss of belonging and being witnessed and seen and heard and understood. But I think what you guys are creating is about empowerment and going, okay, even if we can't change a situation, how can we be surrounded by people who are committed to being and doing better, to thriving, instead of having our little ecosystems of like being connected in our suffering?
And it's just letting people know that they're not alone. Because
Yes.
I think going through the diagnosis and, everything that comes with that, there's a sense of isolation and being misunderstood. And this,
Yeah.
I hope, these podcasts and having them, they've got far better reach than just having in a chat group on Facebook or things like that. These are things that they can replay. If they're ever having a down day, go back to a podcast and go, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And that's my hope for all of this. So
Yeah.
And I hope that people can see their own potential.
yeah.
And, if they are down here, I hope that they do want more and they know that they can go and get more. And the fear is not just keeping them where they already are.
Yeah. I can feel emotion coming up for me, because it's one thing for me to be here today in 2025 having this conversation as the version of me who has grown and who has evolved. But I'm imagining 10 years ago me listening to this, covered in goosebumps, thinking, what would she have needed to hear? And honestly, when I was at the peak of my struggle, the peak of my challenge, I am so bloody grateful for my survival responses. I'm so grateful for flight. I'm so grateful for fight, because it kept me alive.
Yep.
It kept my kid alive. And we talked before about breaking off guilt and breaking off shame. If you're doing the best you can just to survive every day, congratulations, because every day you wake up, you've done it. You successfully survived another day.
Yep.
What that version of me didn't know is that there even could be more to life than just surviving every day. I didn't know that it was possible, and I certainly didn't know how. I had never had a frame of reference. When I looked back all through my childhood, all through my family tree, all in my extended family, all in my friendship groups, they were just all survivors.
Yeah.
They were all people doing the best they could. I never had a frame of reference for someone who could go from just surviving their way through life until they died to someone who was like, oh my gosh, life can be fruitful and it can be present and experiential and delicious, even when there's crap happening, even when it piles on, even when it stacks up around you and you can so easily go, this is not fair. What did I ever do to deserve this?
So is a lot of it then mindset?
Well, I'm a little bit funny about the word mindset because I think it's misunderstood. But to an extent, if you break the word mindset down, what are we setting our mind on? We're setting our mind on whatever's in front of us. And so if that's all we've known, then that's what our mind is going to be set on, and that's going to dictate our reality. So a really big thing for me, which is why I mentioned again about the support groups and stuff, I wanted to find the spaces where I was challenged to set my mind on different things. So having a mind that is focused and set on evolving every day, always better than yesterday, is really, really different to having a mind that is set on our suffering and struggle, on our misfortune, on our diagnosis, on our label, on our disabilities. Because for every disability label I have hidden in my top drawer, I have so many abilities and I have so many gifts. But I needed someone to show me. I can feel myself tearing up. I needed someone to show me. And so my commitment to my kids is to show them their abilities, to show them how they can thrive, to be different, to not be like everyone else, and to love that about themselves.
I just
Because
love that, Ash.
we all have abilities. We're all here for a reason. And so, yeah, I'm just sitting with this emotion that's sitting right here for me because I never had anyone to tell me that.
Yeah.
I've spent my life striving and trying to prove myself and prove my worth and trying to use the school system and the, corporate system to feel worthy, doing it with that disability frame of mind, only seeing where I was failing, where I fell short, where I wasn't good enough, where I was never good enough, even with my high distinctions. But if someone had have helped me to set my mind on my abilities at a young age and show me where I shined, where I was capable, where I was competent, the world was a better place because I just tapped into that weird, unique little ability that other people around me don't have, and it's not on my school report card.
Mm.
What are those abilities? So imagine if this podcast became crossing out the dis and navigating abilities that are just different
Yeah.
to what the world expects.
Love it.
Because
Jen, we've got something else to put on our list.
yeah, but regardless, we are all different, regardless of diagnosis, if you've got one or not. We are all different. Like you couldn't look at one person and say that they're the same other than a twin, but we won't go there.
They're
But
even different. Totally. My husband's a twin.
we have different drivers and we have different opinions. So we're never going to be the same, but that's okay. And I think that's what we need to get out there.
Yeah.
Okay, one not to be okay, but it's okay to be yourself.
Yes.
Regardless.
Yes.
So that's
totally
massive for me. Yeah.
And I love, Jen, your comment of, you say it to me all the time, you're perfectly imperfect.
100%.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. When I did your course, Ash, we focused, and we do have to wrap up because we could talk about this all day.
Might be a mini series.
Might be a mini series, yeah. No, we talked about the word should.
Yeah.
That has really stuck with me. Should is such a shame word.
Yeah.
And I try my absolute best now to never use that word because I don't have to do anything. It's what I choose. And I just make myself feel guilty when I say, I should have cooked dinner. I should have gone for a walk. I should have done this.
Yeah.
So wrong. Now, I asked you, Ash, and I really didn't ask any of the questions that I'd planned on asking.
They're the best conversations.
No, but it's good when it's organic and flowing because I think it's going to resonate to the audience as well. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, and in our sessions, Ash, we go where it leads us.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what's happened this morning. I did ask if you would mind taking our listeners through a really basic process of something that they can just do as soon as they get off, and any other time when they feel their nervous system being unregulated. Would you be
awesome. Absolutely, I can do that. So I really like to do this sort of through a meditative process. And the reason for that is from a nervous system perspective. When we close our eyes, our vision is our dominant sense. So we have a frame of reference. I can see out my window right now that the sun is out, that it's daytime. I'm in the room that I'm in. So it kind of anchors me into this time and space. And if this time and space for people listening is a stressful time and space for them, then having our eyes open and being stuck in that time and space is not very helpful. So I'll invite our listeners in a moment to close their eyes. But I'm curious, is this going to be on YouTube or somewhere else?
It'll be YouTube, Spotify.
Awesome. So, yes, that's amazing because if you didn't know this already, you can actually save or share a link from YouTube or Spotify at a timestamp. So all you do is you just go to the part that you want it to start at, And then you click the share button and it will ask, do you want to share and start at this time point? And you just say yes. So what I would encourage you to do is, as you're listening to this, if you go through this now and you love it, I strongly encourage you to bookmark it, as well as share the timestamp with yourself and just save that link. Because what that means is you'll be able to come back to this particular episode and repeat this little meditation as many times as you like and share it. Give these guys some love, because I'm just going to take you through something that I would typically do with a client or in my group programs and those kinds of things, just to help you to be really present in your body, to rest your mind. And also therapeutically, we've spoken about some heavy stuff today, just to release some of that guilt, the shame, anything that might have been coming up for you today or on any given day, because we know that we're pretty harsh on ourselves on a daily basis. And
I'll actually go through and find the timestamp, and I will let people know where it.
Yeah, amazing. All righty. So I'll invite you guys to all, I'm just going to anchor myself a little bit. It's been a big conversation. I'll invite you to close your eyes. And when I do this, I like to place my hand over my heart for a few reasons. The main reason is that it really anchors me into being present in my body. So you'll feel the temperature start to increase between the palm of your hand and your chest. Bring your awareness to your breath. Taking a nice deep breath in. Settling into a nice, comfortable position. Placing your other hand wherever it feels right. Might be on your lap, might be by your side. Just begin to really tune in to the natural rhythm of your breath. Allowing it to flow gently, just as it is. Now I want you to take a nice deep breath in through your nose, feeling the air as it passes through your nostrils, and feel that air fill up your lungs. Hold it there for a moment. And now exhale slowly. So just breathing out through your mouth, releasing any tension. We're going to do that again. So taking a nice deep breath in, all the way until you feel your tummy expand. And then breathing out through the mouth, letting your body soften, almost like if you imagine your body was jelly on a plate, or if I wiggled the plate, it would jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. Imagine yourself just sinking really deeply into your body, into the present moment, feeling supported by the chair beneath you. And as you continue with that breath, I just want you to say in your mind, I am here for me. I am worthy of care just as I care for others. And just feel those words settle into your heart. Release any tension from the shoulders. Feel your heart start to expand and open. And then I want you to imagine that you're standing in front of a beautiful river. And in your hands, you hold a small, light, kind of woven basket. And inside that basket, you get to place all the things that are weighing you down. You might want to place in there any guilt, any shame, any regrets, any obligations or expectations. You don't need to name them individually. Simply just feel their presence. Allow your mind and your body to know what it's ready to place in that basket. And with each breath, I just want you to imagine placing those burdens into the basket. And as you do, feeling the weight leaving your body as you transfer them. There might be expectations that you place on yourself, Might be feeling like you have to say yes to everything, like it's your responsibility to not let anyone down. Keep going. And once there's nothing left to put in that basket today, I just want you to imagine yourself still with your hand over your heart, just gently sitting that basket on the water, setting it down into the river, and just breathe as it floats away, completely effortlessly, completely carried by the water, knowing that it's safe to let go of those things that are not serving you. You don't need to hold on to them anymore. Trusting that the river will carry those burdens far, far from you. Helps you to feel lighter, helps you to feel more open, more expansive. Maybe most of all, helping you to feel more present. And as you watch the basket drift away, I just want you to repeat these things to yourself, either out loud if it's safe for you to do so, or just in your mind. It's safe for me to release what no longer serves me. I'm allowed to prioritize my well-being. I'm enough just as I am. And it's okay for me to learn, grow, and evolve. I choose to care for myself with the same compassion and kindness that I give to others. Just feel those words resonate in your heart, creating warmth and strength within you. Congratulate yourself for giving yourself these few moments today, knowing that you can come back and repeat this anytime you like. It's our little gift to you. And when you're ready, just start to bring your awareness back to your body, taking a nice deep breath in through the nose, wiggling your fingers and toes, noticing the surface beneath you, supporting you completely, taking one big final deep breath. And as you exhale that breath, just imagine yourself stepping back into your day today with a renewed sense of empowerment, with peace, with stillness, with presence. And whenever it feels right for you, you can open your eyes, carrying this sense of lightness and self-compassion with you, knowing that by caring for you, you're actually creating space for more love, more connection, more presence with everyone around you. That's absolutely worth it.
It is.
You
Thank
can,
you so much, Ash.
you are welcome.
That was just amazing. I feel so calm.
I love that. I love that that's something that people can come back to, and please don't do that if you're driving. Kind of important to keep your eyes
realize
open.
how relaxed you actually go because you get caught on your word, and it's just
Yeah.
so I will definitely use it over and over.
Oh gosh, that's a gift for me too,
Yeah,
because I always use my own stuff. It's always nice.
yeah,
And yeah, we have a whole lot of stuff that we're launching this year. So all of our pillars, we've got everything from parenting and relationships to your own personal growth and even leadership development, which is a really interesting one. But having those little meditations, we've got some really inexpensive options to have some of those little things that just are really great anchors to
yeah.
come back into your body, to become back into the present moment. And yeah, so you can find us at anywhere on any socials at Remind Institute, and we would love to be able to support anyone however we can.
Ash, thank you so much. It's been amazing today, and absolutely we will put all of your social media and ways to contact you if that's what our listeners choose to do. But thank you once again. It's for sharing your journey as well. It's been amazing, and on a personal note, you know how much you've changed my life. And for that, I do thank you.
It's an
See you
absolute
all
honor.
next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.